For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in Part A of House Report number 118-108, offered by Mrs. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 495, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in favor of Amendment number 1 as it revises the Comptroller General's Congressional Review Report to include an estimate of the effect on inflation. Without my amendment, the real-life consequences of Joe Biden's spending spree in the White House will not be taken into account by Congress as they perform their Article 1 duties. This will provide transparency for the administration to answer to the people's House. The GOP majority has been empowered to hold the Biden administration accountable and demand transparency by revealing just how much Biden's executive orders are costing American families and small businesses. Coloradans are struggling right now as they deal with the disastrous effects of Joe Biden's destructive economic policies. The policies passed last Congress unleashed record inflation on Americans that has decimated our bank and retirement accounts, increased gas prices to record levels, raised utility bills, drove up grocery costs, and it made it harder for Americans to live their life as they intended. This excessive spending has real consequences. American families will pay an $8,581 inflation tax over the next year. Currently, 20 million Americans cannot pay their electric bill. We have seen a 4.3% decline in real wages since Biden took office. Americans have lost more than $2 trillion in retirement savings. Americans are paying more for everything because of left-wing extremist policies. My amendment will allow House Republicans to conduct important oversight over these expensive executive regulations to ensure Joe Biden cannot continue to issue rules that send America into a deeper inflation crisis. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of my amendment as well as the underlying bill. And with that, Mr. Chair, I reserve.
The gentlewoman from Colorado reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York wish to seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I claim the time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this amendment requires the Comptroller General to include an estimate of a rule's effect on inflation in the Congressional Review Report. I oppose this amendment because it requires an estimate of a rule's effect on inflation, which would require the Comptroller General to speculate, based on limited evidence, how rules that likely have little to do with the economy would affect inflation. The GAO has already reported to Congress that they would be unable to assess a rule's impact on the economy with the limited information available. And in any case, the 15 days provided for major rule reports do not allow for the GAO to make a determination on a rule's effect, even if they had the necessary information. Adding more requirements for various officials to estimate a rule's effect on the economy when they lack the necessary time and information to provide a concrete answer will not heighten the efficacy of this bill, but will rather create more unnecessary estimates for Congress to weigh in their review of agency rules. In addition, the Nonpartisan Congressional Research Service has previously noted that estimating the total cost of regulations is inherently difficult and that such estimates of the cost of regulation should be viewed with a great deal of caution. Like the OMB, CRS has noted that there are significant methodological challenges to estimating and aggregating the total costs and benefits of rules. I oppose this amendment because it focuses only on the cost of regulatory protections while completely ignoring the monetary benefits of those critical rules, and because it asks the Comptroller General to do what is impossible to do. I reserve.
Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's perfectly reasonable to have a report that looks into the spending that has been taking place for the past 2 years and beyond. But this inflation is impacting millions of Americans across our nation. As I stated, American families will pay $8,500 and $581 in an inflation tax. We should be looking into the impacts of the spending that is taking place in Washington, D.C. Even if it is an estimate, we need to have an idea on how this is impacting families and why we currently have 20 million families that cannot afford their utility bills, why we've seen this 4.3% decline in real wages since Biden took office. I would like to see that report. And again, I urge my colleagues to vote yes on Amendment 1. And Mr. Chair, I yield.
The gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from New York.
Mr. Chairman, it's very nice to say that we should examine the inflation that has occurred and the spending that has occurred, but that's not what the amendment calls for. The amendment requires the Comptroller General to include an estimate of a rule's effect, a rule that presumably hasn't yet been issued, on inflation in the Congressional Review Report. Now, I stated before why it's impossible to do that, why the CRS and the OMB say that there are significant methodological challenges to estimating and aggregating the total cost and benefits of rules. But and therefore we shouldn't be asking the impossible, and it certainly has nothing to do with looking at prior expenditures or prior borrowing. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in Part A of House Report 118-108. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 2, printed in Part A of House Report Number 118-108, offered by Mrs. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 495, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in favor of my amendment, which will require the Comptroller General to publish the GOA study of rules on its website. My simple, straightforward amendment ensures that the American people will be better informed of the regulations unelected bureaucrats are imposing on them, costing as much as $2 trillion in compliance costs and economic losses. During the first year of this administration, the Biden White House added more than $200 billion in new regulatory costs. Without my amendment, the real-life consequences of Joe Biden's left-wing agenda will not be seen by those impacted most. This will provide transparency for the administration to answer to the American people. While the federal government continues to spend trillions of dollars it doesn't have, inflation has hit a 40-year high, and everything we buy, including food, gasoline, and so much more, costs more. Instead of addressing these major economic concerns head-on, the Democrat solution is to keep imposing unnecessary regulations and spending money we do not have. The GOP majority has been empowered to hold this administration accountable and demand transparency by revealing just how much these regulations are costing American families and small businesses. Unnecessary government regulations and excessive red tape impose crushing economic burdens on the people in my district and across our great country. Since Joe Biden took office, his administration and unchecked bureaucrats are going full steam ahead on enacting a radical left-wing agenda throughout unilateral executive action. House Republicans should be working to cut wasteful spending, get to the bottom of fraudulent payments made by the federal government, support American energy production, and oppose tax increases proposed by the Democrats. Economic strength and job growth result from policies that unshackle job creators, allow American ingenuity, and provide certainty. My amendment ensures the legislative branch and the American people can provide proper oversight and no longer allow this administration to go unchecked. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of my amendment as well as the underlying bill. Mr. Chair, I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose? Does any member seek time? The gentlewoman from Colorado.
Mr. Chair, I yield.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 3, printed in Part A of House Report 118-108. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part A of House Report number 118-108, offered by Mrs. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 495, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Mr. Chair, I rise in favor of my amendment, which will require Comptroller General's Congressional Review Report to be made available on the Congressional Committees of Jurisdiction. This simple good governance amendment allows Congress to take back its Article 1 authority in our system of checks and balances. This will provide transparency for the administration to carry out its congressionally authorized duty. By requiring the administration to submit its plan to the People's House, we can provide important oversight and provide feedback. It's time for the legislative branch to actually do its job rather than ceding all the power to the White House and bureaucrats. Our founders were determined to create a government whose branches work together. By requiring the Comptroller General to submit the Congressional Review Report to the Congressional Committees of Jurisdiction of the rule, we will allow members who know these issues best to examine the real-life impacts of these executive regulations. Congress needs to take back its power and advocate for the American people we represent. My amendment will ensure these voices do not go unheard, hold this administration accountable, and ensure Biden's streak of unchecked power comes to an end. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment as well as the underlying bill. Mr. Chair, I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. Does anyone seek recognition? If not, the gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back the balance of my time.
This guy, he keeps on making history. After being indicted for the second time and charged, a former guy went to a restaurant in Miami to celebrate. Well, it was his birthday. Okay, we'll give him that. He was there, giving it all the big un, and said, "I'll pay for everything." Now you're thinking, are you sure he said that?
Are you ready? Are you ready? Food for everyone. Food for Thank you very much, darling. You take care of yourself.
He did a lot there. He had some hands on his shoulders, and he really did say he was picking the bill up.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Food for everyone. Food for Thank you very much, darling. You take care of yourself.
See if you can work out the punchline before we even get there, because guess what? People had to pay out their own pocket. I'll run the tape again. He said he was going to...
Are you ready? Are you ready? Food for everyone. Food for everyone.
Oh yeah, apologies. We got the first tape wrong, by the way. This is what really happens.
In Jesus' name.